Hello friends. I can see 90% of my viewers don't subscribe while watching videos. Please hit the subscribe button and like this video. Press that bell icon for notifications. And tell me in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Your support means everything to me. Now let's start with today's story. My name is Sofia Rinaldi, and this is the story of how betrayal became my greatest blessing. The marble steps beneath my designer heels felt like ice as the doormen blocked my path, their cold eyes delivering the most devastating blow of my life. But what happened next shocked everyone, including myself. I stood there, 35 years old, wearing a gown that cost more than most people's monthly salary, staring at the brass doors of the Milan Arts Gala that had welcomed me for nearly a decade. The same doors that tonight would remain forever closed to me. Apologies, Signora. Your name, it is not on the list. The words hit me like a physical slap. Not on the list? I had been instrumental in organizing this gala for years. I had brought in donors, secured artwork, and elevated this event to international recognition. My name should have been at the very top of that list, highlighted in gold. But I knew exactly why it was not there. 3 months earlier, I had made the mistake of speaking truth to power. During a board meeting in the pristine conference room overlooking Milan's cathedral, I had dared to challenge the systematic exclusion of female artists from our exhibitions. I had presented statistics, research, and passionate arguments about how we were failing to represent half of humanity's creative voice. The silence that followed my presentation was deafening. The board members, mostly men in their 60s and 70s, had looked at me as if I had committed the ultimate blasphemy. Their faces showed not consideration, but barely concealed contempt. Sophia, the chairman had said with a patronizing smile, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but perhaps you do not understand the commercial realities of our industry. That was when I knew I had crossed an invisible line. In their world, challenging the status quo was not progressive thinking, it was treason. Now, standing on these steps, I could see through the floor-to-ceiling windows into the glittering world I had been banished from. There was Marcus Benedetti, the collector who had once called me his brilliant protégé, now raising his champagne glass in animated conversation. There was Isabella Torini, the curator who had praised my exceptional eye for talent, now laughing at someone's joke as if she had never known my name. They had all turned their backs on me with surgical precision. My cheeks burned with humiliation, but I refused to let tears fall. Not here. Not where they could see my pain through those massive windows. Instead, I turned slowly, my silk gown rustling against the stone, and walked away. Each step of my heels against the cobblestones echoed through the narrow Milan streets like gunshots in the night. The walk home felt eternal. Every step carried the weight of my professional death sentence. In the art world, being blacklisted by the Milan Arts Gala was equivalent to being erased from existence. No gallery would take your calls. No artist would work with you. No patron would fund your projects. I had lost everything I had spent 15 years building. That night, I sat in my apartment overlooking the Navigli canals, still wearing that expensive gown, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. The woman looking back at me was broken, defeated, and utterly alone. I had sacrificed relationships, worked 18-hour days, and poured my soul into an industry that had just discarded me like yesterday's newspaper. But somewhere in the depths of that despair, something unexpected began to kindle. It was not grief, it was rage. Pure, white-hot fury at the injustice of it all. The next morning, I woke up with crystal-clear purpose. If they wanted to play games, I would show them what a real player looked like. I picked up my phone and dialed Lucia Moretti, a brilliant sculptor whose application to showcase at the gala had been rejected 3 times for being too avant-garde. Her voice was surprised when she heard my name. Sophia? I heard. Well, I heard about last night. Lucia, I said, my voice steady and determined. What if we created our own space? What if we stopped begging for their approval and built something that would make them beg for ours? The silence on the other end was pregnant with possibility. Are you serious? She whispered. Dead serious. I am done playing by their rules. Within hours, I had called 2 other women. Valentina Rossi, a painter whose work had been dismissed as too emotional by the male-dominated galleries, and Chiara Santoro, a multimedia artist whose installations were considered too provocative for traditional spaces. We met that afternoon in a small cafe near Porta Garibaldi. The energy was electric. These women had stories identical to mine, talent dismissed, voices silenced, opportunities stolen by mediocre men who controlled the industry through old-boy networks and inherited privilege. "We need a space," I said, spreading architectural plans across our tiny table. "Something raw, something authentic. Something that represents what art should be, free, revolutionary, uncompromising." Valentina leaned forward, her eyes blazing with excitement. "I know a place. There is an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. It has been empty for years, but the bones are good. High ceilings, natural light, industrial character." We drove out there that same evening. The building was massive, 3,000 square meters of potential. The concrete floors were cracked, the walls were stained with decades of neglect, and pigeons had made nests in the steel rafters. But standing in that cavernous space, I could see it transformed. I could hear the echo of voices discussing revolutionary ideas. I could smell the paint and wine and passion that would fill these walls. "This is it," I declared. "This is where we build our empire." The next 3 weeks were a blur of 18-hour days, borrowed equipment, and sheer determination. We could not afford professional contractors, so we became them. I learned to operate scaffolding. Lucia mastered electrical wiring. Valentina discovered she had a talent for interior design. Chiara became our social media strategist and event coordinator. We painted the walls white to create clean exhibition spaces, but left the industrial elements exposed. The steel beams, the concrete floors, the large factory windows. The contrast was stunning. Sophisticated art displayed in a raw, honest environment that breathed with authenticity. We called it Luz Libera, free light. The name captured everything we represented. Illumination without restriction, creativity without compromise, truth without apology. The opening night was scheduled for exactly 1 month after I had been humiliated on those marble steps. We had invited everyone we could think of: artists, young collectors, journalists, students, anyone who might appreciate what we were trying to build. I was terrified we would be speaking to empty walls. The night arrived with autumn rain beating against our factory windows. I wore a simple black dress, elegant but not ostentatious. This was not about showing off wealth or status. This was about showing the power of authentic creativity. At 7 o'clock, the first guests began to arrive. Then more. And more. By 8 o'clock, the warehouse was packed with people I had never seen at traditional gallery openings. Young artists with paint under their fingernails. University students with burning eyes and radical ideas. International journalists who had heard whispers about this underground movement. Even some celebrities who were bored with the predictable Milan social scene and hungry for something real. The energy was absolutely electric. People were not just looking at art. They were experiencing it. They were touching the sculptures, sitting on the floor to examine paintings from new angles, engaging in passionate debates about the meaning and message of each piece. Lucia's sculptures, which had been rejected as too avant-garde, had crowds gathered around them discussing their revolutionary approach to form and space. Valentina's paintings, dismissed as too emotional, were bringing people to tears with their raw honesty about female experience. Chiara's multimedia installations, labeled too provocative, were sparking the kind of conversations that art should inspire: challenging, uncomfortable, transformative. I moved through the crowd in a state of surreal amazement. These people were not here out of social obligation or networking opportunity. They were here because they were genuinely excited about what we had created. A young journalist from Vogue Italia approached me near midnight. "Sofia Rinaldi," she said, "this is incredible. How did you pull this together so quickly?" I smiled, thinking of those marble steps and locked doors. Sometimes the best art comes from necessity. When traditional spaces reject you, you create your own space. When established voices silence you, you find new voices. When closed doors try to stop you, you build new doors. She was scribbling notes frantically. "This feels like a movement, like something that could change the entire art scene in Milan." "That is exactly what it is. I replied. The success of our opening night was beyond anything I had imagined. Social media exploded with photos and videos from Luce Libera. The hashtag Luce Libera started trending in Italy. Articles appeared in international art magazines within days. But more importantly, something profound was happening in Milan's cultural landscape. Young artists who had been ignored by traditional galleries were submitting applications to showcase at our warehouse. Collectors who were bored with safe, predictable investments were visiting our space to discover emerging talent. Students and activists were organizing discussions and events in our main hall. We had become more than an art gallery. We had become a cultural revolution. Within 6 months, Luce Libera was the hottest destination in Milan's art world. International magazines were featuring our exhibitions. Celebrities were dropping by unannounced. Young artists were competing fiercely for wall space in our warehouse. Meanwhile, the Milan Arts Gala that had excluded me was struggling to maintain relevance. Their exhibitions felt stale and predictable. Their opening nights were attended by the same aging crowd discussing the same tired topics. Where our warehouse pulsed with energy and innovation, their pristine galleries echoed with the hollow sound of tradition trying desperately to justify its continued existence. The contrast became embarrassingly obvious during Milan Fashion Week the following spring. While the official art event struggled to attract media attention, Luce Libera hosted a collaboration between fashion designers and visual artists that dominated international headlines. Our warehouse was featured on the cover of 3 major art publications that month. That was when they started calling. The first approach came through Isabella Torini, the same curator who had ignored me at the gala. She wanted to explore potential collaboration opportunities between the traditional Milan art institutions and our innovative new space. I listened politely to her carefully worded proposal, then declined with equal politeness. "Thank you for thinking of us, Isabella, but we are quite busy building our own future." More calls followed. Board members who had voted to exclude me suddenly wanted to discuss mutual interests and heal divisions in the art community. I declined them all. The most significant call came exactly 1 year after that humiliating night on the marble steps. It was the chairman himself, the same man who had dismissed my concerns about female representation with patronizing condescension. "Sophia," he said, his voice carrying none of its former authority, "we would like to honor you at this year's gala. A special recognition for your contribution to Milan's cultural renaissance." I sat in my office at Luce Libera, looking out over our busy warehouse floor where 3 different exhibitions were being installed simultaneously. The irony was absolutely delicious. "That is very kind of you," I replied sweetly. "But I already have my own party." The silence on the other end was everything I had hoped it would be. 2 weeks later, our Venice exhibition opened to international acclaim. The installation, titled Locked Doors and Open Minds, featured work from 50 female artists whose careers had been stifled by traditional gatekeepers. The opening night drew more press coverage than the Milan Arts Gala had received in 5 years combined. Standing in that Venetian palazzo, surrounded by journalists and collectors and artists whose talents were finally being celebrated, I thought back to that night on the marble steps. The humiliation that had felt like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of something far more significant. They had locked me out of their exclusive party, thinking they were destroying my career. Instead, they had forced me to create something infinitely more valuable. A space where authentic talent could flourish without compromise, where revolutionary ideas could be expressed without permission, where the future of art was being written by voices that had been silenced for too long. I was no longer just a guest seeking admission to their world. I had become the host of a world they desperately wanted to enter. The lesson was crystal clear and brutally simple. They had locked me out once, believing they held all the power. But everywhere else, doors swung wide open, because I had built my own house, and everyone wanted to live in it. 6 months later, the Milan Arts Gala attempted to rebrand itself as progressive and inclusive. They announced a new focus on female artists and emerging voices. Their marketing materials featured language about revolutionary thinking and challenging traditional boundaries. It was pathetic and transparent. They were trying to copy what we had built at Luce Libera, but they could not replicate the authentic passion and genuine commitment that had made our space special. You cannot fake a revolution. You cannot manufacture authenticity. You cannot pretend to be progressive when your entire foundation is built on exclusion and elitism. Their rebranding failed spectacularly. Attendance at their events continued declining. Their media coverage became increasingly irrelevant. Meanwhile, Luz Libera expanded to a second location in Rome, and we were negotiating for spaces in London and New York. 3 years after being humiliated on those marble steps, I received an invitation to speak at the Venice Biennale about the future of art curation and cultural democracy. The same international art establishment that had once shunned me was now seeking my insights on how to remain relevant in a changing world. During my speech, I spoke about the night I was locked out of the Milan Arts Gala. I described the humiliation, the rage, and the determination that followed. I explained how rejection had become revolution, how exclusion had sparked inclusion, how their attempt to silence me had amplified my voice beyond anything I could have achieved within their restrictive system. Sometimes, I concluded, the greatest gift your enemies can give you is the motivation to prove them wrong. They locked me out of their party, thinking they were ending my story. Instead, they were just forcing me to write a better ending. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Today, Luz Libera operates in 4 cities and has launched the careers of over 200 artists. We provide grants for emerging talent, organize cultural exchanges between countries, and advocate for systemic change in how the art world operates. We have become exactly what I had envisioned during those dark hours after my public humiliation. A force for authentic cultural revolution. The Milan Arts Gala still exists, though barely. They hold their annual event in increasingly smaller venues for increasingly smaller crowds. Sometimes I receive invitations, formal, desperate attempts to associate their failing brand with our success. I decline them all, but not out of bitterness. I decline because I no longer need their validation. I have something far more valuable. The respect of artists whose careers we have launched, the gratitude of audiences whose cultural horizons we have expanded, and the satisfaction of knowing that we have fundamentally changed how the art world operates. That night on the marble steps, when those doormen blocked my path and delivered their crushing rejection, I thought my world was ending. I could not have imagined that it was actually the moment my real life was beginning. They wanted to lock me out of their exclusive party. Instead, they forced me to create the party everyone wanted to attend. They thought they were closing doors. Instead, they were opening every door that mattered. My name is Sofia Rinaldi, and this is the story of how betrayal became my greatest triumph. How exclusion became my path to inclusion. How their locked door became my open window to a future more spectacular than anything I could have achieved by remaining inside their suffocating world. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being rejected by people who were never worthy of you in the first place. Sometimes the greatest favor your enemies can do is force you to discover just how powerful you really are. They locked me out once. But everywhere else, I became the guest of honor, because I had learned the most important lesson of all. When they will not give you a seat at their table, you build your own table. And you make it big enough for everyone they left behind. If this story of resilience, revenge, and revolutionary change inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of people who turned their greatest defeats into their most spectacular victories. Your support helps us share these powerful narratives of triumph over adversity. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of dreamers, fighters, and game changers.